Hello, everyone. This is episode 58 of the Dresden Files podcast. And today we're just going to go straight into denarians because why not?
Yeah, so you take 58, you divide it by... Oh, never mind. It's got a 5 in it. Is that close enough?
Well, it's not a multiple of 5. We should have thought about that more.
Possibly. But you go with what you got, right?
So everything doesn't have to be a theme. Right?
We're not Jim Butcher, so we don't have to follow the rules, right?
We make our own rules.
Damn right.
All right. So we're trying to continue the theme of talking about bad guys, and there's just about 30 of them for this episode. So we're going to talk about what we know, which is not a whole lot.
It's going to be good. We've got research, we've got conspiracy theories, we've got new stuff to bring to the table potentially. We'll see. The research isn't airtight, so if you know something we don't, then that's the name of the game. But kind of excited for the stuff that we did kind of hammer out. So
yeah,
I think
you should start with the stuff you found about etymology and names.
You want to start with that? Well, I mean, it is alphabetical, so
I think that's a nice light little starting point before we get too crazy.
Quotation marks.
Sure. So doing some research, it's probably pretty well known that, the names of angels kind of reference what they are / what they do. So you've got the IEL as one of the two common endings. You've got a variant of AEL, and it generally means of God, but there is some variation. I'm not a Hebrew scholar or expert, so if we mispronounce things, yeah, I'm a professional, just so you know. But so if we mispronounce things or anything like that, give us a little bit of help. And we're also not like biblical Hebrew language scholars, so forth and so on. But anyway, so generally speaking, it seems like of God. So example, Uriel is at least apocryphal, if not in the Bible directly. I'm like 99% sure he isn't, but his name means light of God, which is something that gets brought up in
Ghost Story.
It is Ghost Story. Okay, I was like, changes, but it's one of the 2 or 3 conversations he has in those books.
Yeah, it was at the end of Ghost Story when Harry started to shorten it to Uri, and he freaked out and said, "Okay, Mr. Sunshine."
Right. Well, I mean, it helps that, Lucifer was also the light of God, and see where that led him. So, and his name, theoretically, he either has an angel name, and, well, he was the angel of light, maybe not light of God, but, So, it makes for a fun time. I see your brain working there.
Yeah. Is there a difference in the kind of light?
Well, and yeah, and Lucifer, of course, to me at least, again, not being a scholar, definitely breaks the mold on the other ones, because we were talking about doing the research. We've got Michael, we got Raphael, who I believe is also apocryphal or a different set of canonicity, at least, because I don't think he actually shows up in the Bible, though I thought he did. You've got Gabriel, etc. So we've got some names to go with. Long story short, way too late for that. We were looking at the names that Butcher basically was inspired to create or created for the Dresden Files. And I say inspired because we've got some chicken and the egg stuff, like with Anduriel. Anduriel had some, it's not 100% created, in the sense that it existed in some other forms. I'd have to check timelines and compare and see where intersections in space-time happen. But Anduriel was out there in the ether somewhere, if not an angel's name. But what I did find doing a little bit of Google Foo and things like that is that there are books that reference similar rooted words. And again, not Hebrew scholar or anything like that. But basically, there are similar words that have to do with taxes and tariffs and things like that. And a word with at least a similar prefix or a similar root basically translates to freedom or liberation, it seems. So taking the IEL and jamming that onto Ander, basically, so Anduriel, it's, you could say he's the freedom of God, or let's see, what was the other? So we got freedom of God or liberation of God or something like that, which is kind of interesting because it's not a very far leap at that point to see him as a rebel angel who's like, you know what, God, that's all well and good, but you're kind of oppressive, so we're going to do our own thing, aka fall from grace and become these nice little Denarian things, Important to note for the Dresden lore anyway that it's established that Enduriel is, one of Lucifer's lieutenants, if not like his main lieutenant during the angelic rebellion, so to take a little bit of liberty there. But and then I believe it's a word of Jim, but I couldn't find the specific source that, Lucifer locked them in coins to keep the same thing from happening to him, basically to keep them away from hell and to keep them from kind of rebelling and ousting him or maybe causing another splinter group and that sort of thing. But they're basically like Lucifer's lieutenants, generally, is my understanding. So, but I wanted to bring that to the table because
isn't take it with a grain of salt. The Denarian said it. What's her name?
Which, Lashiel?
Yeah, Lashiel. Lashiel said that basically she got thrown out. She wasn't part of the rebellion. She just kind of questioned God or kind of agreed with them a little bit, and she got tossed out with the bathwater.
Yeah, right. No fence sitters. So
yeah, because there was a word of Jim saying that she just tried to hedge her bets, be on both sides at once, and then she got kicked out because you're not allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
not
anyway,
all of them was his lieutenants, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure to bring up the Endurial thing because I did see a couple of Reddit posts, some from 3 or 4 years ago that made stabs at it but could never find a root. And I mean, don't have time to sit down with the other 19 names that we were able to drum up. But similarly, I don't think that they were just poof out of thin air. He probably found other references or inspiration, if nothing else, Ursiel, at least the Latin root, as far as I understand, is bear. So very surprising that he takes a bear form. So, I mean, does that make his name?
Has Jim ever played World of Warcraft? There's a demigod called Ursiel, and that's a bear god in World of Warcraft.
Right. There you go. So, yeah. And so I'm sure he's done, similar research. I don't recall if he has, but I'd be surprised if he hasn't. Let's put it that way. Played World of Warcraft because he plays,
Yeah, he video games.
Right. Video games a lot. I think he's played well, probably.
And didn't you say that one of the places that you found Anduriel somewhere in the ether was one of the Knights of the Old Republic games?
I think it is. I didn't dig all the way in it, but let me find that guy. So that was one of the things too, is there is also an Anduriel who the one-liner basically, without going through the whole article, is that they're a young new journeyman walking the halls of the Dark Jedi Brotherhood. Yeah, okay, that doesn't scream, gray anything to anybody, so.
Wouldn't that just be the Sith Brotherhood? Or Dark Jedi different?
It's been a little while since
podcast.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna head that off right now.
Into the lore, but you've got the gray Jedi, you've got the dark Jedi, you've got the Jedi and the Sith, and everybody else. Okay. I've got the eras and whatnot, but I couldn't find where this information's referenced. But the screenshot kind of looked like one of the Knights of the Old Republic games, possibly 2, which is the one that I got a little bit into and then didn't finish. And you can hate me online later. So.
All right, but something you said was 19 other named ones that we have found. No, we have about 20 that are described, but only about 12 of them are named.
Oh, okay, that's not so bad.
Deidre's as we see her a lot, but she never has a name for her coin. Same thing with Rosanna, and a few others like that. And then there's
those are the more willful hosts, right? They basically are. They are the host. They're still them. Get power from the coin, but
they still have their own mind.
Right. They're partnered. Yeah. So I guess we know either the host or the angel for 19 of them, but we don't know the angel name for 19 of them. So
yeah, because some of them there's one guy that's just described as green antlers, and then there's shaggy feathers. And
Right.
Shaggy feathers. That name gets me every time.
Well, he's a Kenku, obviously, so.
And
Kenku angel.
there's an obsidian statue, and then there's just this guy named McCullen who died, and we have no description of
You
anything.
actually bring up an interesting point.
And then there's Jenkins wearing the red shirt.
Yeah.
Some of the supernatural beings are like mortals. They still they still have a choice. They have a soul, kind of. White Court, for example.
Okay, sure.
And some others. I don't know if Kinku would count, if they have choice, or if they are without choice. I don't know if the she is close enough to the mortal realm to be considered mortal or like have a choice.
Well, not the
I'm wondering what can pick up a coin other than a human, because you said a Kinku, like maybe a Kinku picked up a coin.
And I mean that's a fair supposition, because we do know from Skin Game that non-humans can be coin bearers.
Yeah, because he has a coin. The
Genosqua or whatever.
They can. They're mortal enough. They are of choice. And I'm basing this on the RP, kinda how it works in the RP in my head. It's like you can fall in the RP, and if you're like half-blooded red court, if you give in and feed, you lose control of your character because you're no longer mortal.
You become an NPC, which is like that's something that I thought was interesting in Fate, is like there are multiple mechanisms to do that, right? So because like once you run out of fate points, isn't that one of the ways where basically the DM takes over your character, at least for a short time?
I don't know about that actually. I never really got to play it. I just looked into it,
right?
Like, superficially.
Yeah. So we know
which supernaturals could be a Denarian.
Well, theoretically, Thomas, like you said, so White Court vampires. We got the big feet people, Bigfoot, however you want to pluralize that.
Any non-turned red court at least can. I don't know about a turned one.
Correct. That's also interesting because it's like a different life cycles of the creature. So for the most part, well, it's not really. For a very short time, it would have been important, but anymore it's sort of academic because there aren't any more half-court vampires, like half-red courts, and so theoretically there aren't any more reds. That's a different conspiracy theory for a later day if we haven't talked about that already. But
there probably are still some reds.
Yeah, I like some of the ideas that were presented about. They're probably not fully wiped out, so. Spoilers, peace stocks, just saying. But okay, so yeah, I mean, as far as who can hold a coin, we don't really have a test or a litmus test. It's like if they're not natives of fairy, I would say, because like fairy, they are, all the she are theoretically immortal. So
I think a good way to put it might be if they turn to ectoplasm,
right?
They can't hold a coin.
Yeah, so like a changeling, I would say, would be able to bear a coin. So
and she leaves a body behind, though.
Do they? I can't remember.
Yeah, they do. I remember this very clearly. I'm so sure about this. I can't give you the exact where we're told, but I'm really sure about it.
Because if they died at the stone table, for example, that's a fairy-made place.
Right. That's still more Never Never than it is Earth,
and I can't remember right now any other she dying in the real world.
Well, so we had the Red Cap and some of his goons, but I don't recall. That was Cold Days, but I don't recall any of them dying out in the world.
Yeah.
In some place we could inspect the body, because we probably fucked up a couple in the jet ski attack, but I don't recall a body. So we'll have to. Now we've got something new. Jeez, we're gonna have to look into that. But.
Really sure that they leave a body behind, and in which case, does that mean they can hold a coin or not? I don't know.
And we're never going to know the canonical answer to that unless Jim decides to write it. Like in the BAT, there's the one guy.
Alex, you have the new questions for Jim, like that nobody's asked before.
Yeah.
Like that we're writing down for when he comes on after. Can you put that down?
Okay.
Right.
And she hold the coin.
Well, yeah, and maybe even open-ended, like who can. Yeah, like I don't know. because that's one of those researchy questions that, like, we need an hour of your time to just ask random bullshit questions. And
hey, we got a lot of praise for coming with new questions for the first time, like, in a long time.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess bullshit wasn't quite the right word. I was thinking minutia, but because, like, the only way I can figure out to draw enough information out of him is, like, come to him with a list. Can she do it? Can can red courts do it? What about black courts? What about, we're pretty sure white courts can, because they can also be a sword bearer and a knight, of a winter knight and so forth. So it's good times.
Good question.
That's terrifying. Can Mavra be a Denarian?
You're welcome. Be sure to check your bed for Mavra tonight, and at least you'll see death coming. So, but you're welcome. Okay, so do we want to talk more about the Denarians? Right. Like, actually them?
On the wiki, there are a list of, I'm pretty sure, 20, because one of them was counted twice. So the named ones are Acariel, Anduriel, Imariel, Lashiel, Magog, which is the only one who doesn't have the EL name, I think.
Also true.
Namshiel, Orthiel, although on another side it was spelled with a D instead of a TH, so it might be Ordiel. Siluriel, Tarsiel, Ursiel, Rumviel, Varthiel. Those are the ones with names. And Magog is the only one who bucks the trend so far. And then there's a bunch of ones that are not named, like Shaggy Feathers, Obsidian Statue, and those ones. And then some others just not even that.
Rosanna's coin. We actually do get Tessa's coin, which I find interesting, because usually the ones where you focus on the character, we don't know what their coin is called.
And that was only a side comment from Deidre. It's like, well, she's going to figure out that Gray isn't actually Nicodemus, or at least Imariel will.
Right.
So it was like just a side comment. That's the only reason we know of it.
Right. Yeah. So Lashiel, Imariel, and what was the other one I was thinking? I mean, sort of, kind of Magog. We just don't know who his current host is. But those are the only ones. Well, and Siluriel. Let's not forget him. Those are the ones that we know the angel name and the host. Well, and Enduriel, of course. I can't forget him too. So there are a few examples, but compared to like 30 names, we don't have a lot where we know both.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can count Ursiel in that as well, since we have known
also true
who he's holding, even though Rasmussen shows up just to die. So.
Okay, so I don't know what I'm talking about. There's more than I thought.
Correct pronunciation is Rasmussen.
Yeah. No, it's Rasputin.
Right.
It could also be a Norwegian or Swedish last name, in which case it's a different pronunciation.
No, I'm pretty sure, based on the little thing I know, little tiny bit I know of Danish, it should be a Danish name because it says SEN, and the other ones don't do that as much.
Yeah, the other ones have SON. The Swedish is Danish.
What about the ON with the
son of Rasmus?
There you go. Mm-hmm. So what about like the O with the little slash in it? What is that?
I think that's Norwegian.
That's Danish.
Or hold on.
That's Danish.
The slash through it shows up in both Norwegian and Danish, I think.
Yeah, we have very similar written things, but that one is a Danish letter. It's pronounced Ø, which also means island.
Oh, all right then.
You have a strange language.
Well, you see, when Danes have like, I think what it is, like 60,000 words, and Americans and Englando people in general have like over 1 million. It's like a lot of our words are going to mean the same things,
right?
In context of this, like, it's all about the context.
Well, you have a lot more words when you steal them from like every other culture. Yeah. So just saying,
it does work though.
Yeah, that's true.
So, continuing on with Denarians.
Yes.
Not getting sidetracked. Let's try this. All right. Well, the most that we see of the Denarians is in Small Favor, Book 10.
Right.
And then, based on the count, and the wiki listed a couple of chapters of Small Favor as the number, there should have been 13 being held by the church at the end of the aquarium fight, and 11 had died at the aquarium. So that gives 24, leaving only 6 Denarians remaining, and those are all ones that already had possession of a person. So when they had stolen Ivy, they needed to get more or kill someone.
Right. Which, and importantly, like we know all or most of those 6, right? So we had Enduriel because Nicodemus, we had Amariel because Tessa, we had Rosanna, we had Magog, we had Thorm Namshiel, and was the other one Siluriel? Was he the one kicking around? Oh, right, Deidre. That makes sense. So there you go. So there's our 6 friends.
Yeah, and of the 13 that should have been held by the church, there would have been, I think, Acario, because he was killed at the beginning of Small Favor by Thomas. And Lashiel should have already been turned in as the previous book, and you should already have Ursiel. And we know that Lashiel and Ursiel have gone away, but we haven't seen Acario since.
Right. And so a little bit of the background too, in case you don't recall, like, so Thomas killed one when they got ambushed. Like, so during the heist to kidnap Marcone, Guard gets injured. Hendrix takes her to a safe house. Tessa's crew breaks into the safe house while Harry and Thomas are there. And then that gives Thomas is basically able to like cut one out of, like he killed one's host basically, and the coin popped out, if I recall correctly. And he went to grab it, but he was gloved at least. And so then, of course,
he just whips it out casually in the car and dressed and is about to crash the car.
Right, that's right.
His pocket with the glove on, and he's like, "Whoa!"
Right. So that's the one we think was Acario, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's like Sonia named it actually.
Right. Okay.
So, and
yeah,
there's a short description of him. It was big and furry and black, and I couldn't tell you much more than that.
And it had teeth, probably.
I assume so. They usually have teeth. So about that, Enduriel is the only one that we see that is described that doesn't have like a battle formation shape, you know, because he does the ghosty flower,
right,
shadowy something or other. But everyone else
talked to me and Justin and Alex before the show started today that he might have been God's original like Uriel spook.
Right.
Makes sense with his powers.
Right. Well, that's because I was wondering if the root had something to do with shadow, because that's his whole power set is, you know, shadow based, even to the point where Vadarung, like, was it Vadarung as Vadarung or was it Kringle?
Kringle.
But okay, so Kringle was saying that he might, you know, actually be able to, like, you know, do reconnaissance through shadows and be listening to freaking everything, you know.
And so that is why Mab stayed around in the conversation, just like not doing anything.
Just blocking him.
But Enduriel's the only one who doesn't have the battle shifting that we see, and that's why he stands out, because everyone else, like Siluriel, did the snake stuff with Cassius, and Rosanna has her like demony goat hoofed thing.
Succubus form?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Granted, Lashiel with Hannah Asher didn't do a whole lot of shifting. He just like
the double eyes, right?
Yeah, her demon form was basically like smoke. Like
get naked and be like tastefully covered.
So her form is kind of like Enduriel's, and not so much a mutation, but a slight alteration, kind of like the shadows, like slight alteration, I guess.
Well, and it seems to vary. The more like control or maybe power is the better way to put that. Like the more power the individual mortals have, you know, the hosts, because, you know, the ones that we know their name and we see them battle shift and whatever, versus like Magog and Ursiel, that, you know, even to the point where like Rosanna and Tessa treated Sonia as an animal and called him animal, you know, because, you know, he is just a body that Magog rides around in, you know, stuff like that. So maybe Asher was powerful enough that Lashiel didn't feel the need to take over. And Nicodemus has certainly got, you know, worked something out with Enduriel so that he doesn't have to give up that power, because it seems like the battle shifting is that much more power they have over you as well. And I think that comes a little bit from a word of Jim. That was
makes sense. The more power they give you, the more power they have over you. Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to find the one that I saw, but
yeah, it's interesting to think about, like, if Harry had taken a blast shield, what would that battle shifting be? I doubt it would be quite as feminine, or as seductress that way, you know. And
maybe just like a trench coat made of purple smoke.
It's got to have a trench coat.
As long as it's not a hat.
And I wonder how much of it has to do with the, say, intelligence of the fallen angel in it. Like, Magog seems to be really, really simple. And he doesn't have the ability to do anything else, but maybe Solurial could do something that's not the snake motif that they had with
Magog
Cassius.
smash.
Right. I mean, yeah, the name kind of, I mean, it helps imply that with just the phonetics of it, right? But that we were having that discussion as well, like chicken and the egg. Did Solurial like show up as a snake motif because Solurial, or because Liver Spots Cassius had, you know, he wanted to do that, like, because that was his thing, because Cassius also still casts snake stuff in Deadbeat. So it's not entirely dependent. So it's like, so did Solurial teach him to do that? Seems most likely. But yeah, like if Solurial found a new host, would he still be Snake Boy? You know?
Yeah.
I think the new host will still be Snake Boy. I'm not sure. Obviously, can't be 100% sure. But his motif, his rune, looks snake-like.
Ah, okay. See, and that's.
But I was just wondering if, like, Cassius still doing snake magic now after having dropped the coin. Is that because he learned snake magic from the coin, from the fallen angel, or was he already like a snake worshiper, snake caster of some sort, and that's why they had that's why he got picked?
Right. It's
an academic question. It's nothing. It's not really relevant.
Sure, but it is kind of interesting, and I mean, Lashiel seems to have a thing for fire and hellfire, for example, you know, and took to Asher.
Lashiel's like a mages in general thing.
I mean, it is kind of like Harry's thing was fire for a lot of it. That's why Navra used fire against him, and same thing with Asher. So it's almost a selection bias.
Well, and Nicodemus said, "I knew I chose the right coin for you." You know, I think that's also small favor because. You know, because then he's like
at the aquarium,
yeah, like let's talk to the old girl, and he's like, yeah, sorry, you know, that number's busy, or some other smartass comment. I know that's not what he said, but it's in the same vein. But it's like, wait, what do you mean you didn't keep her? Like,
yeah, so,
I feel nothing.
I think in the aquarium, Nicodemus said, "I knew I chose the right coin for you," but then after Demon Reach, essentially, as they're getting away, is when Nicodemus realized that Shadow is gone.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's. By the way, I love that that scene makes me really like I smile every time. Where it's like Shadow knock him out, and we'll deal with this later.
Oh, right.
And Harry pretends like he's knocked out. I like it.
You're right. I totally forgot about that little scene too. That's funny.
Amazing how many rereads you can do, and every time it's like, oh yeah.
Well, I've decided, because like there are things that I remember when they're brought up, and then there are things that it seems like there's no way I knew this, but there's no way I could have missed this in like 4 rereads. And I've just decided that 15 books is too much space in the brain to keep it all there. So what's great though is it's like I've got short-term memory loss or something. Every time I read it, it's like the first time. It's like, this is amazing. Somebody should read this. It's like I haven't read it 5 times, you know, because I always get something new.
Yeah,
but it kind of makes the show hard.
When I reread it, it's like, oh yeah, this is so good. It's good. It's good the series is so long, like, because you don't have to, and you listen or read other books, and it's like there's not room for everything. So it's nice. It's like a reset.
Right.
Might know where the story's going, but all the details.
Right, exactly.
All right. There's one thing I find interesting about Namshiel, Thorned Namshiel, or Thorny Boy, as Dresden called him at some point, was that he was Tessa's sorcery teacher. Why was Tessa learning from another Denarian that wasn't her own?
Denarian might not be like magic affinity.
And Mario is he's able to do the praying mantis shape. So it seems kind of.
But it seems like the mutations are not exactly, you know, based upon then you're good at magic or not good at magic. They can almost all do them.
Right.
Like
So, I
Magog.
mean, Thorned Namshiel, Silurial, those were magic-y types that also had battle forms.
Ashiel might
But
fall in for that too.
I don't
Those are
know
a
that.
battle form though. Or another that we've seen.
Hmm?
She has
But-
like magic affinity, kind of, right?
Which one?
Yeah,
Lashiel.
right. So long story short, in 30 of them, 5 of them do similar things. But what I was going to say is that like not all of the fallen do either, right? We don't really see Magog do anything magical. We don't see Ursiel do anything like that. We don't see.
They can transform, and that's about it. We haven't.
But all of them can transform, is what I'm saying. So
Except
that's
for
not
Duriel,
necessarily.
apparently.
Well, and Duriel just is not enabled to. Now, reading this word of Jim and being nitpicky gives me a new conspiracy theory, but I'm gonna save that for a minute. So anyway, and Duriel theoretically can do it. He just, his whatever Nicodemus's thing is, a lot of it has to do with the free will of the host, right? They still can't violate free will, I think, is part of the missing piece there. So, well, hold on. Because I just read this, so this is going to be a little bit. I think this is my Word of Jim file here. Too many damn tabs open.
This is good podcasting right here.
I know, right? So, all right.
Quality content, guys. Subscribe for more brokenjaws.xyz.
Yay, the plug is already done.
Okay, so the question is, why did the Denarians in Small Favors seem less powerful than in Death Masks? And the answer was, if a fallen has essentially overpowered their human host, then they have limited free will. They can't use the free will of the human. A Denarian is much more powerful if they use the human as a partner. So free will is a component of it. So I guess they can, overpower them, but
there's no point in it.
Yeah, and if the human pushes back,
they're just like, no, I don't want no partner.
Right. So I think that's where you get the ones that are basically animals, like Rasmussen was with Uriel and Magog.
About Rasmussen, when Harry did the soul gaze with him, Rasmussen kicked him out. Well, Ursiel kicked him out, but Rasmussen refused the help of Michael. Like he was choosing to be with Ursiel.
Well, you always choose to grab the coin.
But he was choosing to stay as well.
Right, which is also a thing, and so is Stockholm Syndrome. So I don't know. Like,
women who get beat by their husband and vice versa stay with their spouse all the time.
Well, there's some of that, but specifically, like, I imagine that dealing with the fallen is like, the craziest drug high you could ever have. I mean, look at what happens to Cassius when he willingly gives up the coin and still is like, a lifetime coke addict trying to get one back. Like, a lot of his actions in Deadbeat are frantic and half insane of just give me a damn coin, to the point where he's going to murder you for 25 cents if that would give him the coin.
Admittedly, for Cassius, he's trying to stay alive.
Some of it.
He's going to die within a year.
Yeah, but there's more than just wanting to survive. It's very erratic, right? This.
Yeah, he wants revenge, he wants the coin, he wants to survive, like a lot of it goes into it, but it's hard to separate a lot of those behaviors from a longtime junkie who's going through withdrawals, right? Like his actions, are right in line with it's like, hey, it's been a couple of days since you had your last heroin fix. You're going to have a lot of the same, I at least imagine. I don't have any friends who have dealt with this or anything, but I imagine you're going to have a lot of the same withdrawal symptoms that Cassius did, where it's like, if I walked up to you after a couple of days cold and said, hey, that guy over there's got a hit in his pocket, you would go freaking murder him to get a hit, like that kind of behavior. So
it just seems one of the things that, yes, technically it's free will, but like if Rasmussen refused Ursiel, or if any of the ones that are really old, like Rosanna or Deidre or Tessa or Nicodemus, they refused the coin and gave it up, they're going to die within a couple of years. And these are centuries years old. So it's like not a whole lot of time for them. It's not like they get half their lifetime again.
Sure.
And it's one of the things that are probably keeping them to stay with the coin instead of giving it up and doing the right thing, as what Michael would call it.
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, there's several unknowns in there that, would be interesting and might shape the thing. Like, we know that Sonya had it for years, but of course not like hundreds of years.
Yeah,
so,
he had it for 4 or 5, maybe. He found it when he was 16.
Right. We could also put into the mix that, Cassius gave up the coin, but didn't necessarily give up the lifestyle, right? So
Yeah.
part of the difference is that, Dresden also kind of lends us a little bit, but, like when Shiro and them save, they have saved Denarians in the past, Sonya being an example, but, theoretically there were others in the past, maybe not very often, but there's nothing to say that, that can't be cured by the church or by the white god in some mechanism or something like that. It seems a little stupid that it's like, well, what do I get if I give up the coin? You get to like suffer and die in the next year, but your immortal soul is going to be okay, which I'm not saying there aren't arguments like that in theology, but that's not no one would give up if that was the answer, right? Like no one would leave the coin. So I'm curious if any of the conversions in the past were the lifers, which I imagine they weren't, right? Rasmussen had been wielding a coin in excess of 100, maybe 150 years, because he was supposed to be going to the gold rush was one of the things we got out of the
He was found
site.
in about 1849 or so.
Right. So he was a 49er, so about 150 years or so, roughly. And then, but he had to be killed to get the coin out. We don't know if anybody, Rosanna, Tessa, Thorn and Namshiel, Solariel, anybody on that level, has ever been recovered. Just maybe some of the lessers like Magog, where, that was Sonya. So, yeah, so it might be, I mean, and really, I guess Michael has the answer for that too, right? Like, they may be beyond, beyond the ability to do that, but it's not going to stop him from trying, even with Nicodemus.
Yes. And
so.
I understand that Michael and all the knights, and they'll be trying to do that,
right.
But it's certainly going to, like, the downsides are so heavy for someone like, say, just Rosanna. Like, she's enjoying being beautiful forever and powerful. And when you give that up, you've got maybe 3 years and you're going to age really quickly and it's going to suffer. And then there's still probably going to be that worry of like, okay, their immortal soul, are they actually going to get a good treatment after that? Probably not. Or at least they'd be terrified of it.
Theoretically, they would, because that's the point. That's the point of heaven. And Dresden Files kind of possibly blurs that. But I mean, we haven't seen that, right? We've just seen the in-between.
Yeah.
So, we know if they were stuck in the in-between, that's probably not going to be a good thing for them. But if they full on, crossed over, then I imagine the typical chorus of angels and everybody's happy and shit, so.
Maybe. Or they have to reckon for all of the things that they did. And the way
that's the other place.
Yeah. And even, so they gave up the coin, but do they actually get fully forgiven? And the way that Harry was talking to Nicodemus a couple times about, like, how many nightmares do you have of the knights showing up? How many nightmares do you have of the enemy, as what he was saying in Skin Game? Like, the enemy can't reach you here, he was saying to Deidre.
Right.
Hades. So, like, they're actually afraid of them.
Right. Well, yes, that I'm sure that's part of it. And really, though, the argument could be made that we're not 100% sure which of the enemy we're talking about. It could have been a Nemesis thing, for example, because Nicodemus seems at least as afraid of that as anything else he's been shown to be afraid of in, like when we found out that Thorn and Namshiel was doing something on the side, like, he was freaking out. He tried to keep that under wraps, but he was not in a good place when he found that out and was surprised, which is not a thing that happens to him very often, I imagine. So
yes, but have we had any hints that the outsiders or Nemesis or any of them can do something to you after you're dead?
No, not that I'm aware of. So, but that's what I'm saying. That's probably
that threaten all of our reality. That might include the afterlife in our reality.
That's,
potentially,
I guess, a big question.
But specifically, Nemesis seems to not really have any power over you once you're dead, because we've seen a couple of those people, So we've seen Cat Sith totally die off screen, right? There was a body. No, he's coming back. But the ladies, for example, both of them, It's not like they got up and did some kind of macabre dance afterwards. What I was going to say, though, to get us back on track a little bit and cover the theology base, and unfortunately we're talking Denarian, so we can't get too far from that sort of thing. But, the whole, how do we know they're going to be treated in heaven and that sort of thing? A line comes to mind in 100 other scriptures potentially, but for the grace of God, I go type of thing. Like, that's the point. That's the point of the knights, is that they're not actually necessarily there to save people from the monsters. They're there to save the monsters.
Jacob's brother.
Right. But by accepting the grace of God and foregoing that and accepting that forgiveness, at least seems to be the implication, in the Dresden verse, then yes, theoretically absolved of sins. That's the whole, Jesus died on the cross thing, is like, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's what Jesus's point was there. So not trying to preach or anything, but because it does butt up on theology, I feel like it's necessary to fill in that gap a little bit.
I guess there's some amount of it that just needs to be confirmed. Like, what kind of scripture are we really going with?
And that's kind of the ultimate question, right? Like, we see a lot of Michael's stuff and we see a lot of Catholic, but we know that Butcher wasn't raised Catholic necessarily, right? So he was a Protestant of some kind, I thought. I'm not sure if we have confirmation. I'm not sure it's super important.
Based on what I know of him, I don't think it was ever confirmed whether he's Catholic or not, but I'm betting not.
Right. Well, I mean, and he says that he's on the fun side of fundamental. So, whichever that is, like Bible camps and things like that, which, to me says more Protestant something. But in any case, that might help inform the thing, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee it, because he writes a pretty good Catholic too, so that's not a slight by saying, oh, well, you're a Protestant, therefore XYZ. It's just like, Michael does a pretty good job with the scriptures and the Latin and, other things like that, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.
Do what?
I said, like, we're Protestants here. Thank you very much. That's like our national church.
Right. I'm not, as an American, I'm not even going to get into the weirdness on that one, but so is there something we could do? We should probably get something a little lighter or a little bit less, eternal soul heavy or something like that. But, because I don't know an argument that I could make that at the end of it isn't going to boil down in the entire point of faith in the first place, which is you're going to have to take it on faith. So if we took the theological argument, the entire point is, some believe anyway that no matter how bad things have been and so forth, is that if you accept, the salvation that Jesus represents, etc., that's enough. And apparently Michael's faith kind of falls in line with that as well. So I'm keeping it light. I'm not going to get into the 31 flavors and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to, is it comes down to faith.
Some people, most people, don't have as much assurances as Michael has been given.
Or, say Nicodemus, because he actually knows, like literally knows that heaven and hell are a place. So.
Yeah. And Michael does. Well, Michael has a team of guardian angels literally around his house at all times.
Sure, I get that, but we're arguing like, why would a Denarian ever give that up? So I think the difference is, since the fallen, specifically the angel piece, left heaven because they felt it was oppressive, at least that was part of the mix of why they ended up leaving, then that's the part that you'd have to, okay, well, I accept the grace of God and therefore I'm going to heaven, but that's where all we do is wear white and strum harps and, stand in single file to get our, whatever, So that's the part you'd have to overcome more than how do I know where I'm going with Nicodemus,
So yeah, I've been always talking about the person being held by the coin, the person that Michael is trying to save. But is it actually possible for the Denarian itself to be forgiven?
And Lash, she'll ask that question, doesn't she? Specifically, Lash asks that question in White Knight, doesn't she? I thought
is this when Lash is starting to differentiate herself, though, when she's like,
I think the Shadow asks something along the lines of there can be forgiveness or something.
Right. which I'm pretty sure Harry says he doesn't know, if I recall correctly. Now, I may be making this up from somewhere, but I recall that kind of conversation. And again, that's that whole point. What's even crazier, though, is that, the specific metaphysics of what's going on is that Lash is not technically Lashiel. She's part Dresden, which is part of why she is differentiated and goes with the shortened, because she's a separate thing and she becomes her own thing. There is no reconciliation with Lashiel, therefore she was always her own. So does Lash
I always
have a
thought
soul?
it was weird that Lash,
you
the entity in the coin, the actual fallen angel, knew everything that happened with the shadow. When I got the impression that it was like destroyed. I think we talked about that before, and there was an explanation for it.
Lashiel, the real one, knew everything was going on with Lash the Shadow, but couldn't control Lash the Shadow. Yeah. So Lashiel knew everything was going on, but couldn't control it, and they're differentiated that way, even though they have that connection. But I really want to know, is it possible for Lashiel, the real one, to get back into heaven?
Possibly. I mean, there isn't anything to go on other than, you have to, like, as far as I know, in no theology am I aware that this conversation's been broached, but that's kind of the point of, the grace again. But the idea, I guess, is if they've fallen, they're kind of done, so there are multiple things that I'm not sure how I can reconcile to even wager a guess. Like, on the one hand, the idea is that the grace of God is theoretically limitless. But on the other hand, the idea of fallen has always been interesting, because even Word of Jim pretty much is that the fallen themselves, the angels, are immutable. But if God created them, does that mean he created them to rebel? Like, you got to follow how far down this rabbit hole and how big of a headache do you want? Because it's like, if they're immutable, then that means he built them to fall, which kind of makes the whole, like, throwing them into hell thing a little overkill, in my opinion.
Unless that's was part of his plan, goes down the line.
And then why does God
be in that position to do something?
Yes. And so it becomes this huge theological thing that I'm going to hit the ejector button on, because we don't have the time. Like,
brain power.
The ejector button on that one.
Right. Like it. No one has that answer, which is why
it's the kind of, if they know that I knew, that they know that I know.
Yeah. Well, and it depends. Like, at some point, so two things come to mind. One is that, we can't know the will of God if we're going to follow the theology thing. And then the other piece is, to me, in a circle, at some point you have to pick where the start is and where the most important aspect is for you. And so a lot of people deal with the whole, like, benevolent, all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God, but it kind of ignores all the other shit, like you said, like the whole, why does God allow evil to be had? And it's like, nobody knows. That's why we go to church, and you accept whichever faith, or even not faith, if you want to go the atheism route and decide that all of that's not really important to you. No judgments or anything like that. It's, nobody knows that answer. And hopefully maybe you'll find out upstairs, but according to our fiction, like, I don't think even the archangels, and clearly Lashiel didn't know, otherwise she would know, right? Like, she doesn't seem to clearly know any of that shenanigans, otherwise she wouldn't have been a fence sitter. She would have picked a side one way or the other.
It seems to me that the angels know a lot about what happens in the universe, in our world, and everything. But those theological things, what does God want, and like, what's his plan? They're like in the dark as much as we are. It's like, you got these assignments.
Right. And that might be just as far as we can take it for our fiction, right? At the end of the day, we are still writing those characters. Dresden Files, to my knowledge, it's not Next File. It's not the Supernatural, where we've got a literal angel or whatever writing the books. Butcher's still
it's actually okay. Spoiler alert: Supernatural. If people don't want to watch, if people still haven't caught up on that, he returns. He is actually literally God.
So whatever. So anyway, long story short, because it's still a work of fiction as far as we know, like, Butcher doesn't know any better than anything. So the angels get marching orders from God, which, for the Dresden Files is essentially Jim, like, so like he's the dungeon master, right? He's the Lord and God of his story. And if he decides to pull the plug, then, we all go home and cry about it for like 15 years. And, that's what we got. But I don't know. I'm not going to profess to have even a guess at the answer on that one.
I know you were trying to keep it light, and I'm sorry I got us into that.
I'm just like cringing at the what's the subreddit going to think of this? Like, I can't wait. Despite the fact that we're totally the host, the views and whatever opinions are not representative of anything. So no, I'm trying to kind of give it the perspective that I'm aware of. Some of it is mine, some of it's just stuff. Most of us in our teens and 20s did some soul searching on some level, and that's where some of my stuff comes from. But I'm not a priest, I'm not a pastor, I'm just a dude. And I'm trying not to be preachy despite everything, because it's like, I don't have a theology degree any more than I've got a Hebrew degree, any more than I'm, just like whatever people get into to get etymology in the first place, whatever that's for, whatever that degree. So.
Don't need a degree to have an opinion on something.
Well, I'm not trying to present myself as an expert. Let's put it that way. So. Yeah. If you've got more questions, go see your local church bishop. What? I don't even know what the other word I was going to say.
Pastor?
Yeah, that must be it. Bishop and pastor at the same time. But, or be like, that's good fiction and move on, like.
Yeah, well, if we just wanted to move on, then we wouldn't have a podcast.
Well, yes. I mean, on the theology parts, like the Dresden Files, in my opinion, the Dresden Files are going to get much more into the theology aspect of it, because, we kind of nailed down that the whole crucifixion thing definitely happened, and we have artifacts from that. So it's hard to talk about denarians and, those artifacts and things like that without getting some of the theology that they're based in. So, but yeah.
Okay. I cannot think of a way to make this a lighthearted discussion again. I mean, not like we're angry, but it's heavy.
It's heavy. It's deep. It's your eternal soul, or not.
So I guess I'll just go back to numbers. Like, there was 13 held by the church and 11 stolen at Demon Reach by Tessa, and then there was 6 that were at Demon Reach and fighting, and there was 1 that was killed at Demon Reach and then lost, and implied heavily that Namshiel was stolen by Guard. So Monarch and or Marcone has Namshiel.
Yes. Which I feel is important. And since you did the whatever thing, while we were kind of re-familiarizing ourselves with this, here's a wild ass guess / crazy theory. Guard took him. So Dresden thought Marcone had him. Okay. I'm going to say him because as far as we know, male host at the time. I don't know androgyny of angels and whatever, but Dresden confronted Marcone about it, and Marcone is like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. And Dresden's pretty sure he wasn't lying, but you can never tell with Marcone. And so he's like, okay, well, where's Guard? I'll just ask Guard. And it's like, she went home, to Monarch Securities, basically. And so we're pretty sure that Guard took him to Monarch. Now, what's interesting to that to me, though, is that we know that Monarch is run by, basically Odin, who is also
the old father,
literally Santa Claus. And Santa Claus has some dealings / affinity with Mab. And so I was like, well, Thornton Namshiel was the one at Arctis Tor, right? So what if Guard took that one specifically because she had the opportunity to do so, and now it's a bargaining chip with, hey, Mab, do you want to fuck up the guy who fucked up your tower? Or maybe because they know that Nemesis is potentially involved there, that they're doing some additional research or something like that. But that's not possibly going to come back and bite us, whatever the answer is. We wouldn't possibly be concerned where, a literal demon from hell a fallen angel wound up. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. It would be interesting if Vadarung gave Namshiel to Mab for her revenge, and therefore probably indebting Mab to him.
Or clearing a big fucking debt.
There could be that. Or whatever Vadarung himself would do to Namshiel, because Denarian and or Nemesis.
Right.
But in Skin Game, when Harry needed to speak to that person, he showed up as Kringle, and he said that he did that because it would make things easier, because if he had shown up as Vadarung, Mab would have had to have a problem with him.
Or there would have been an obligation, right? Wasn't
something that, it kind of like,
I thought it had to do with, I thought it had to do with obligation, because if he had shown up as Vadarung, there probably were like bad blood, I think was a little bit implied, but specifically like the who owes who a favor, whereas like showing up as Kringle kind of greased the wheels on that one way or the other.
Because different aspect, different debt. But
right.
If Vadarung has Namshiel and Mab wants him and doesn't, like, Vadarung hasn't given him, maybe that's the beef.
Possibly. I want to just say this as well in case everybody hasn't seen this as well, but there was some Word of Jim that I was looking at earlier this week, I think, where because I'm in the Discord chat as well, and they were talking about how when you owe a favor to a fairy, like what happens if the fairy dies, right? For instance, like the ladies, and Jim has made it explicit that the mantles are owed the favors. And so that does kind of matter when you show up as Vadarung or Kringle, because those are mantles, So that's interesting, because Molly, for example, inherited all of Maeve's old bullshit and favors and debts and whatever else. So, which we see in Cold Case and, has been implied for a while anyway, I think.
I don't think that system is fair when the old owner was inhabited by Nemesis and just went and made all kinds of bullshit happen.
Possibly, right? And that's an interesting, metaphysical kind of question too.
I can see how the system kind of works with the mantles have the debt and the things they owe, but that kind of gets thrown out the window a little bit when basically Nemesis fucks up with the mantle.
Well, we could do a quick loophole in the sense that so Nemesis maybe didn't infect the mantle, obviously. Otherwise, we have to say that Molly's infected. So maybe Nemesis infected Maeve herself.
Yeah, but Maeve had control of the mantle.
But when Nemesis fucks shit up, it doesn't obligate the mantle because it was Maeve doing it, not the mantle.
Yeah, maybe. The way I kind of figure,
we're going to fill 18 months more conspiracy theories with those ideas. So you're welcome, guys. Like,
well, the book should be soon, right?
Yeah,
got short stories pretty soon.
What happened is time travel. No, I'm just kidding. Don't. It's not time travel. But go ahead.
I thought about Nemesis theories that, like, with what's his name, the cat.
Cat Sith.
Cat Sith.
Cat Sith.
Yeah, I had half of it already.
Right.
He like
the cat with the lightsaber. Come on.
He basically, Nemesis takes over. He's like complete control, kinda, almost. He's like, I am Nemesis. This is drone 5432.
Sure,
kinda, yeah. But like the more powerful the entity that it infects, like say Maeve, for example, I'm thinking maybe it can't do that. What it can do is like basically, like we said, give her control over the mantle and then manipulate her.
Right. So
there's like the whole time it felt like Maeve was a petulant child, which she is, but she wasn't Nemesis.
Yeah, the difference is Maeve wanted whatever Nemesis gave her, which was the ability to lie. But for example, Cat Sith and Leah, they didn't want it. They wanted to stay their she-self.
Yeah.
And so they were fighting between like Nemesis directly controlling and Leah's normal state, which you see when she's a she-sickle, and Cat Sith as when he's like vibrating across the boat.
Right. And I also want to jump this one because this is the next conspiracy theory that's going to get invoked here. Not every she is a mantle, right? So that's something we got to split out. Like Leah, presumably not a mantle. Cat Sith, not a mantle. But we did see the ladies twice get infected, and
I mean, I would say that Leah and Cat Sith actually are mantles based on their position.
It's possible that Cat Sith is because he's theoretically, like the Cat Sith, and yeah. But I don't think Leah is. I mean, maybe if you took the Lananchi part would be, so that if we take that theory, though, if we decide, that theoretically those guys are mantles, then does that might help differentiate why we've seen Nemesis infect certain people, because at that point, everybody that we know that was infected by Nemesis was a mantle, right? So that's kind of interesting, but because there's been some debate on whether or not we know any mortals that have been infected with Nemesis, and is that even possible?
Can Denarians be infected?
Well, that's a good point, right? Because we've had Thorn and Namshiel. Theoretically, Nemesis was involved there. I forget the exact trail of logic where we found that out, but he was definitely working with the Black Council at Arctis Tor.
The trail is kind of that Nicodemus is working against Nemesis, and he is not happy that Thorn and Namshiel was at the attack on Arctis Tor, and that the attack of Arctis Tor was somehow Nemesis, but we're not sure how.
And this
I
obvious
think that
question,
was Titania, but go for it.
When you're talking about they're meant to be immutable, if a Denarian is immutable, can they be infected? Or are they not immutable because they can be?
Then they're open to that influence.
What the hell would the host do if it's infected by Nemesis and it still has a Denarian?
Well, that's kind of the point. Theoretically, it's the same as if the ladies got infected, right?
But there's something. It's not, the mantles are a force, but they're not personalities. They're not intelligences. The Denarians are.
I mean, Molly is going to not be Molly if she wears the mantle long enough. That doesn't happen because she's just wearing a different coat, There
are definitely personality traits built into the mantles.
Right.
They are forces. They do affect them, but they're not another personality entity the way a Denarian is.
The way it was described is that in 20 years, you would not be able to physically and mentally be able to tell the difference between Lily and the old
Aurora.
Yeah, so, I mean, with that sort of thing, if the mantles aren't personalities, what the hell are they? Because at some point you stop being Lily, for example, and start becoming, well, not the mantle, apparently, because it doesn't have a personality. Nah, I don't buy that. It's not a separate entity in the sense that it's, like the Denarians are, right? The Denarians fell, they can talk to you, whatever. But the mantle
it's not sentient, but there's
That's a good distinction.
Yeah. Okay. So if you have one person who has a sentient Denarian and the Nemesis, what the hell is going to happen?
Right. Well, and we don't 100% know the best hint we get is Cat Sith, right?
Yeah.
Because it was steering Cat Sith like a puppet, whether he wanted to or not. But theoretically, Nemesis does the demon / dark, fallen angel thing, and the whole I'm gonna make you want this, right? That's how it works. Is I'm gonna give you what you want, and then we're gonna do that.
Stuff. Yeah.
And so theoretically, that's usually what happens. Whereas when Harry gives Cat Sith an order that he has to, by obligation, fulfill because he's a she, and Nemesis is like, fuck that noise, then you have conflict, So
Nemesis has to do with choice?
Well, it has to do with control at the very least, right? Because it gave Maeve the ability to lie, which she couldn't do as a she, let alone as the Winter Lady. If nothing else, it gave her that much.
So
it's really funny that it gives her the ability to lie, which is sort of a measure of giving her free will.
Right.
Well, which is funny because I definitely get the impression that Nemesis, the outsiders as a faction as a whole, not a big fans of free will.
Well, and then I have a question. Yeah. Can you take the evidence of Leah went to Mab, presumably, in order to get help getting Nemesis out? Is that a choice? Is that free will?
Who told you that, though?
Based on the implications of a couple different conversations between Leah and Mab with Harry, saying that Leah needed help, in order to remember her place, and Leah was wanting it to happen.
Which sounds more like, maybe Leah herself wanted it, whereas Nemesis wanted to cap Mab.
Yeah,
and Mab convinced her that's what she wanted. Like, it sounds to me a little bit like she came to get uppity and Mab taught her place like she taught Slade. Like, at what point did Slade decide to love Mab? Or did he get fucking brainwashed into it through years of torture?
Leah sought help by trying to rebel, and then Mav was like, "Oh, you need help.
And
Let me
there's
help
also
you."
the way Leah behaved as the Leah sickle was like, you have to go, I'm going to lose control soon.
Yeah.
And it's like, she was aware of what's going on.
That was while in treatment.
Yes. But it's like, how much of that is a choice for her? And how much of that represents free will that she may have as just a normal amount of?
And there's questions there too, because theoretically the she do not have free will at all by the mortal sense. But
they may not be able to lie, but they have ways of making their choices their own.
Yeah, and I don't understand the metaphysics behind that either necessarily, because they do. They clearly make choices, hold grudges, make deals and shit like that, but they don't have free will in the same sense that Dresden does, right? Like, they don't have a soul that needs saving in the sense of the theology of it, right? So there is some hair splitting there somewhere where it's like, yes, they make choices, but maybe they don't have 100% free will, but because she are part of the Never Never and part human, they have some choice, but not necessarily. Like, Leah couldn't just walk off the job, in theory, right? And if Mab did, even if she could, the world would suffer, like, in big ways.
Leah couldn't walk off the job, maybe, but Maeve did for like 150 years. She neglected her duties. That's why Mab needed to replace her. Also because the Nemesis.
Right.
So it's like she had the choice to do it or to not do it, with all the forces of the mantle making her do both. And she chose to fuck off and party.
So next week's topic,
free will.
Yeah, and the mantles and all of that shit, because we kind of got a little away from the Denarian side, but I'm just like, yeah, we're over a little bit anyway, and I have no idea how to answer that question. Like I said, I've got
so that'll be our cliffhanger. Is the question of free will. Plug out the rest of our stuff.
We'll totally answer that for you guys, so like, don't worry about it. The First Church of the Dresden Files podcast is in session. We'll figure out free will and all of that craziness. So
immortal souls,
yeah, right. We got that all in the bag. So podcasts and plugging our stuff. So we got Dangerous to Go Alone, which is a podcast about nerd and geek culture. We've got the Great Scott podcast, where they're watching The Office and talking about that sort of stuff. We've got High Fantasy, which the director is also a part of. Yeah?
Yeah, which we don't talk about philosophy quite so much as things that irritate me.
So that's the what is bothering the director this week in writing,
Yes.
So
pros are often brought up, as I understand it. Brandon Sanderson's especially.
Sanderson, there's controversies.
Storming Sanderson.
What's your next topic? Do you guys have one set?
I think we were talking about the middle.
The middle.
The middle.
Is that a book? Is that literally the middle of writing?
It's the middle of writing. Like, how do you start? How do you deal with the middle? And we spent an episode talking about the beginning that was actually just bitching about the middle. So we're going to actually,
that annoying thing where all of the story happens.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay, I see. So that's that, and then there's us, and then we sort of have the long haul, but I'm not sure if there are any new things going on there.
And we did do the end of the year thing.
Yeah.
We have a banner. If you go to the website, it says special end of the year 2017.
So it wasn't Kinder Eggs, but if you like watching people open shit, then we've got the podcast episode for you. So,
alrighty. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.